Welcome to Love in a Podcast. I'm Nate, and to my right is my beautiful partner and co-host.
Hey, I'm Shiloh.
So we wanted to preface this episode by letting you know that you may hear the sounds of dogs in the background.
Yep, little beings.
There are approximately 3 of them, and
approximately.
We are not the type to want to lock them up just because we're recording an episode. So if you've heard it in the past episodes, because it's certainly there, you're going to hear it in future episodes as well. Hopefully you're a dog lover. If not, hopefully you understand.
Very good. Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of shaking and moving around. They like to nap, but they do also like to move because they're alive. So welcome back.
Woo.
Hopefully you've been listening to us and you listened to previous episodes, so you have an idea of what we're about and who we are. This episode is called Love and Vulnerability.
That's a big word.
It's a huge word.
There's a lot of weight to it.
It weighs a lot. It should. It does. All the feels. During this time in our world, it's impossible to ignore how vulnerability has made headlines everywhere. We believe it's been a huge part of our society speaking up and possibly even beating our past super strong selves into submission.
Well said.
Not that it's bringing out a violence to kill our former selves, but I know I've had to look back and reflect on what I always believed vulnerability was and really talk to that woman and say, hey, you were wrong. Vulnerability was always necessary to be loved. You weren't weak all that time, and your insides were screaming to be let out and free. I did walk through life wearing armor with a brick wall between myself and others, and also holding on to chained rabid crocodiles to keep myself safe. I had a lot of issues.
As far as for me, I didn't even know what the word vulnerability meant until 3 years ago. So this is a really good topic because it
wasn't in his vocabulary.
Not at all.
Yeah.
And not only that, not just for me, but for my paying attention to others' vulnerability. It just wasn't, or maybe I was paying attention to and taking advantage of other vulnerabilities.
Yeah, that's often done. Right.
And I can go into more detail on that later.
But it's taken a ton of self-development via books, therapy with different therapists, a lot of yoga, a lot of praying and meditation. And now I'm working with a shaman, and it took all of that for me to allow myself to be seen. And so now I'm finally reaping the benefits every day, a little bit more and more. But can you imagine?
Such a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Can you imagine how much time, energy, and money was thrown at this for me? A lot.
Yeah.
I mean, who's counting? I would hate to count, but I would love to count. I would love to know how much I've spent. But here I am in uncharted territory, being vulnerable with someone in a partnership, which is the first time ever in my whole life.
Well, wouldn't you know it? Me too.
Right? So, wow there. FYI, I'm definitely going to be working on myself until forever. I have not broken through to the other side by any means.
I'll be done in like 3 days.
He's on a very intense journey. But so I did some research, as I always do, for your pleasure and for my knowledge and both of our knowledge. And according to psychologist Karen Young, without vulnerability, this is quoting Miss Young, without vulnerability, relationships struggle. Vulnerability is, here I am, my frayed edges, my secrets, my fears, my affection. Be careful, they're precious. And in return, it invites, oh, I see you there. It's okay. You're safe. And here's me. It builds trust, closeness, and a sense of belonging. Relationships won't thrive without it. Vulnerability is openness to experiences, people, and uncertainty. It's terrifying at times and brave always.
That's
that
beautiful.
Really resonated with me a lot. Hopefully it did with you too.
It packs so much into one quote, into one paragraph.
Yeah. It definitely broke it down for me in a way that I can understand it, and it's simple. My take on the necessity of vulnerability is because of Brene Brown, who I'm very grateful for. But I do believe wholeheartedly that vulnerabilities are profoundly understated in a lot of relationships. But more than that, vulnerabilities are misunderstood as well. There's a fear of judgment, a fear of being discarded, of being taken advantage of. The list goes on and on with reasons why we hold back with others. And that's what we are here to discuss today. Our ability, because it is an ability to trust the one you're with enough to be raw and bare. Because on the other side of that vulnerability is strength, connectedness, and love.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So buckle up, folks. This episode is designed in 2 parts. First, we will list the 6 necessary components to practice vulnerability with each other, meaning Nathaniel and I, with personal examples. And then second, I will list 7 ideas for how to be vulnerable in an intimate relationship.
So yeah, as per usual, we're going to be mixing in our own experiences and our own, our own background into giving you these 6 necessary components and the 7 ideas. And yeah, we'll take it from there.
Yes. Yes, sir. Okay. So first and foremost, Nathaniel and I begin, right? So in our beginning, Nathaniel was intensely open with me. I mean, we may have had an unfair leg up here due to knowing each other previously. But what do you think? I mean, I think we kind of did, but we did it. I wasn't as vulnerable at first by any means, but because it takes time to open up, and I'll expand on that a little bit. But I felt safe enough to be vulnerable with him in the beginning.
And for me, it was just something where I've been really working toward sharing what I'm going through, and it's a good way for me to help heal certain past wounds, but also still to be proud of who I am.
Yeah.
Even if there is mental illness behind it, or there's, there were bad experiences in the past or things like that, I'm still proud of myself. I'm still here. And with Shiloh, it was easy to be more vulnerable with her. And it took a lot of work for me to get to a point where I could tell anyone about some of my struggles,
Mm-hmm.
and, a lot of what I was open about. And I was open about a lot. And,
Right.
it felt good. It was comfortable. And, I could tell that Shiloh, I don't know that guarded is the word, but I know that there were things that you had, that you kind of just still needed to feel out the conversation. And you need to feel out,
Right.
where I was going to be, and you sharing your vulnerabilities. That's a big deal. That's a huge deal. And this is our first conversation.
Right.
It's 3 hours long.
And that was the beginning.
It's texting.
So I could definitely, so first there's that is the beginning. And then there has to be a daring to connect. From our first conversation on IG, we both felt pretty safe and we dared to connect. There are 3 examples of this. 1, following your intuition. 2, living with heart. And then 3, risking it. Right? So intuition, I followed my intuition and shared past experiences. We went so far as to he included his latest relationship with his son's mother, which in turn gave me permission to share why I always chose to not marry or have children. So it's a give and take, right? It's definitely not just one-sided. But, and it might be abnormal in speaking for the first time, to share so much. But trust me, whether we knew each other previously or not, we started this habit, which is very crucial to share with each other because it's a potential partnership. So creating a habit early on makes things easier should it continue.
For sure.
So following your intuition, and then secondly, living with heart. The bravest thing in a relationship is to be vulnerable and to risk, to live with heart, right? Oh my God. And that's so easy to say. Open up, live with heart. But I know it's so freaking hard to open sometimes, like opening your mind and opening your eyes and, following along and then opening yourself. Because there's that feeling of being discarded. And on top of it, we think, well, I don't care what they think or what they do, and I don't care about anyone's opinion. But yes, of course you care. Of course we all care. You're not a sociopath, hopefully. You do care about what other people think, and so I risked it. I risked living with an open heart and possibly being discarded or possibly being left alone again. But I trusted it anyway. And then number three, risking it, right? So it goes right into risking it. I wasn't looking for love or a relationship when Nathaniel came
Yeah, me
along.
neither. Also, I
I
mean,
wasn't looking for it.
when I
I
reached
didn't
out to you,
even
it
have
was
it in my mind.
right. It was
Mm-hmm.
completely innocent. It was just a, I remember Shiloh from high school, and it was just I thought about her throughout the years, and she's one of those rare
Mm.
people that I had only um good experiences with, which
Mm.
coincidentally, actually her best friend, same thing. We all went to school together, but
Mm-hmm.
um yeah, that would just I just want to make it clear, neither of us were looking for a relationship.
No.
Neither of us thought that that when I said hi, it was going to go where it did.
No, not at all. So risking it wasn't in my mind at the time. And I honestly didn't think I was even in the market to risk anything with anyone. But as we grew in our relationship, I realized that I was still dealing with some serious issues from my past. I thought I had overcome most of them, but I was surprised to see how much I struggled with some of these past issues of, there's trust issues and oh my God, being hurt. And I was involved with someone who was physically abusive and mentally, emotionally very abusive. And I lost a lot of confidence. I lost a lot of my self worth. But I thought I had overcome all of those things, but I was still struggling with a lot of it. And I still do sometimes. It took a long time for Nathaniel to get inside the closed off parts of me. But when someone is worth the energy, you'll see that they are by their actions. He was the most patient and understanding and open with me to create a feeling of trust. So I could then open up about some things that I didn't care to share, didn't really need to, I didn't feel like it, or I didn't trust anybody. And I was like, it's none of your business, you know?
One of the things I'd like to mention, and this just kind of, this hit me, and it's that as you were expressing what had happened to you in a previous specific relationship about being harmed, I knew I was different than I used to be, because instead of looking at it as like, I would love to go and do all this stuff to that guy, instead I was actually more thinking, what can I do for Shiloh? What does she need from me to be able, since she's sharing so much of this, what can I do in that regard? And that for me is a lot of growing up for me. Instead of looking to be violent, I was looking to be helpful,
and of service. More than helping, it's just being of service to me. And I started to have that permission to trust. And slowly, the cliche, analogy, like an onion, I had so many layers, but he got through layer by layer, and it was worth it. And I don't think, like he said, I don't think Nathaniel was in that mind frame where he was like, I'm ready for everything. I'm ready for a partnership or blah, 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 blah. It was just kind of, it's important to keep yourself safe with certain aspects of yourself. But then again, it happens naturally. Don't rush it. Don't force it.
Right.
Trust your intuition, live with heart, and then risk it. Don't do it backwards. So those are the three things that really helped with me in opening up. And then that moves into living with courage, right? And letting it translate into your relationships. Living with courage is a saying, but it's something that is part of a DNA that you have to cultivate. Brene Brown, I'm quoting her now. She says, you can choose courage or you can choose comfort, but you cannot choose both. And what does that mean to you? Think about it. Imagine being uncomfortable in your relationship sometimes. This is where you grow in discomfort, period. Comfort is wonderful and beautiful, and it's, it feels lovely and warm and safe, but sometimes discomfort is where you grow. Right. And I'm not saying that, I'm not by any means saying constantly put yourself in uncomfortable situations with or comfort conversations even with your lover or significant other. That's called drama.
Right.
But because there's this comfortable place where nothing important is said. Living on the surface and feeling like it's good enough. But that's not how I treat this relationship. It's different. I speak up. I demand respect. And I did demand respect when I felt like I needed to. I'm safe with this person to open it up and get uncomfortable. So in turn, arguments will ensue, right? This is normal, believe it or not, and yeah, I'm sure a lot of people that are listening, you've heard different people's perspectives and point of view about communication and arguing and, emotions and feelings and all this stuff. But I truly believe that arguments are normal, and arguing your point of view, being seen and heard, but also listening to your significant other's perspective, this is paramount to a relationship, period. So open it up, people. Just open it up. So living with courage.
I would just like to add to that, arguments, sometimes it's not the core of the argument that leads anywhere. It's the aftermath. It's when you're both cooled down and you've got...
That's what it should be, I think.
Right. I feel like you see more clearly. It's just how it works, but look for that. Again, arguments are a necessary part of life. I've had arguments with my closest friends, my family.
Yeah.
With
but
you,
now it's like everyone's so like offended, and you don't believe in the same thing I believe in, so you suck and I hate you and we can't be friends anymore. And it's like, whoa, like, why are we so divided? Why? If in the bigger world, everyone is so divided. Honestly, it's insane. I'm 36, but I remember being younger and being able to disagree about things, and people weren't bashing you on social media and telling you you're a jerk off and, being mean and critical and, oh my God, so don't become divided in your partnership. Let an argument turn into something that could possibly be really great. And it's just having that open mind to it. So in living with courage, think about this for a minute. What would you do if you could live without shame or fear? Think about that. What would you do? What would you do if you could tell someone that you love them? Like Nathaniel went out on a limb and just said it to me. That takes a lot of guts, right? But think about it. What would you do if you could tell someone you love them? What would it be like if you could tell someone that you miss them? That's being vulnerable. We do need to say some of these things to each other sometimes. Obvious things still need to be heard. And then think, what if you could initiate sex when you wanted to? This is another episode entirely, by the way, but it's an important way to be vulnerable with your significant other. Initiating what you need for yourself more, what you need to grow for yourself and, to be intimate. What if you could really get rid of relationships that hurt you and be vulnerable and be like, this isn't working. I can't do this right now, maybe in the future, but right now I can't. And why, or what would it be like if you could fight harder for the relationship you're in? Be vulnerable and fight, show that you care. What would that be like for you? That's living with courage. And in living with courage, wrapping up living with courage, you can't trust that there won't be rejection and disappointment. But you can trust that you'll cope with it if it happens. You will. You will cope with it. You will be able to handle it. And this is so close to what Brene Brown teaches us with her work, that when you're actually in the arena, fighting your ass off, taking risks, just overall being vulnerable, expect to fail and to fall. But what's harder to live with is tiptoeing around the edges of something that feels important. It's that bullshit of wanting more, but never dropping the guard enough, being vulnerable enough to let it in. That's living with courage. That is living with vulnerability in your day-to-day life and with your relationship. And then moving on from that, looking for a new what if, right? So I like to play this game, and I bring it into my yoga classes a lot. What if I could, or what would happen if I tried this? What would happen if... And it's not like I should have or regrets or anything like that. Not like that. Not if like, what if I had done this in the past, but being more like a child and saying, what if I tried this? What would happen? And I think that that's really important to do in your relationship and to question your own beliefs, looking for a new what if, because sometimes we believe things for so long that they just settle in and stay there without challenging whether or not they're still working for you, right? I can honestly say I've changed my beliefs concerning vulnerability multiple times over the past 18 years of dating. And for most of that time, I had an open mind to taking chances, but being vulnerable was not my cup of tea at all. It was so unsafe, sticky, ew, gross. And before things started to get really, intimate and I had to be vulnerable, that's when I would back up and be like, you're boring. I don't really want to do this anymore. Or I would be drinking and that would open me up to a point where it was like I wasn't being vulnerable. It was a flood
Right.
of emotion and everything because I wanted to connect, but I didn't know how to do it as a sober person. And I would just connect with people who didn't really deserve the vulnerability and didn't deserve my love and care and attention. I would just give it to them. And I never knew the balance. I was really bad at it. But think about it. What would happen if you would open up and take a chance and let yourself be vulnerable? Yeah.
Well, no, I was just gonna say that for me, it was I believe that I faked vulnerability.
Oh yeah, yeah.
That
I've
was
seen that a lot. And maybe I did too. Yeah, to get what you wanted
right.
out of it, and it's manipulation more than
Absolutely.
connecting.
I basically faked my vulnerability and used it as a way of manipulating someone else's vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
And I did that a lot.
How many of y'all out there can relate?
Yeah, that's a huge part of.
And I don't want to say listen,
life.
I don't want to say that that's more of a masculine approach to it, but being the person on the other end, I've noticed, and also with my friendships, I've noticed that men don't know how to be vulnerable, so they weren't taught how to. I don't know.
No,
you can get into this, but you don't really know what it really takes to be vulnerable, so you just use someone else's to get farther.
Well, that's the thing. They'll say what you want them to say. Like I used to do that.
Boy, my goodness.
My vulnerability was faked because all I was doing was just saying what you wanted to hear. It's kind of like a sales pitch,
Yeah. Yeah, car salesman all day.
Yep.
And then, too often our behavior is driven by the need to avoid shame, the need to avoid receiving any proof that you're not worthy of love, right? Connection, proof that you don't deserve what you've asked for. And that just turns into, feeling like you're not worthy. And the more that you feel like you're not worthy, the more you'll act as though it's true. And then the more you disconnect. But what if you believed you were worth that connection? The risk of not being received is always there, but that is in no way a reflection of unworthiness in you. That's not a reflection of who you are or what you deserve. So looking for a new what if and questioning your own beliefs is really important before you can even embrace vulnerability, which brings us to the next part. And as explained by Brene Brown, people with a strong sense of love and belonging believe that vulnerability is a necessity. I'm going to say that again. People with a strong sense of love and belonging believe that vulnerability is a necessity. They believe that within their vulnerabilities are the things that make them beautiful. Like, what? Why would I? That's not beautiful. In vulnerability is seen as weakness. So you're thinking weakness and flaws, and that's not, how is that beautiful? How? It's a question.
Yeah, absolutely.
But let's say you weren't raised with a strong sense of love and belonging. You weren't showered with kisses. You were showered with neglect. How would a child who grew up in an unsafe place to show vulnerability become an open human being as an adult? If vulnerability was seen as a weakness, not as this beautiful piece that should be seen and respected. How were you, Nathaniel, how were you raised concerning vulnerability in relationships? Like, what was the dynamic in your early years?
That's kind of a tough question. I mean,
It's not easy for anyone. That's why I'm
no.
putting you on the spot, because you're the one that's
Yeah.
in front of me.
I mean, honestly, it's just one of those things where, as far as it went with like partner relationships, we didn't really talk about that stuff.
Mm.
So, really, my parents, like my dad didn't raise me to be, Mr. Tough Guy and be, he's the great thing with him was he was, it was more of an emotional thing. Um, so instead it wasn't discussed into relationships either though. So I didn't know, I mean, although I wasn't this person that was like brought up to be, brought up to like, eye for an eye and, to, go and beat up the bully or something. That
Mm.
wasn't that, that was, I'm grateful for that, but I also
Yeah.
didn't know how to actually act in a relationship. So with a girlfriend or anything like that.
Right. I
Um,
mean, we learn by seeing what, examples,
right.
and taking that into our lives and growing up.
Sure. So basically watching your parents' relationship and watching others that are in a relationship that you're very close with,
Mm-hmm.
that's where a lot of people learn that stuff. So if you're only exposed to a relationship where vulnerabilities are hidden, are shame
Mm-hmm.
and that sort of thing, then you're most likely going to grow up to think
Without a
that as
doubt,
well.
you won't innately know
Right.
to share, because it means sharing sometimes sharing your vulnerabilities. It's seen as like you could possibly get kicked out of the pack and you'll starve and die.
Right.
That's that's like nature versus nurture.
Yeah, very
And
much
no
so.
one wants to die, so everyone is just kind of like going with the flow and doing the same thing as the next person.
Right.
But embracing vulnerability, it's opening yourself up. There will be examples a little bit later in the show about how you can open yourself up in a relationship. So we won't go into that right now, but believing that vulnerability is key to connection, right? Because it is the courage to be open with another human. What is to be done for people who don't know, that are already in relationships, that are married, they're raising children, they're running companies, they're running countries. Maybe you're with someone, or you are the someone who finds it painful to be vulnerable. Maybe if you are the one who can share, maybe you could show your significant other first, like saying the words that are pressing from the inside and opening yourself up and letting them know. It's giving without expectation or agenda, and receiving with an open heart. This is all mushy gushy. Yeah, a lot of people don't do these things. But I will explain a little bit more in detail how you can help someone or how you can help yourself.
Yeah.
So the
and-
last,
I mean, well, I was just going to add to that, let's say you're in a marriage, you're 10 years in and you're listening to this podcast with your significant other and you realize that you guys never really confronted all of your vulnerabilities. I mean, this could be a jumping off point to start over, to start fresh, maybe things were a little, like things have been getting a little confusing and you don't know where your partner's head is at right now or that sort of thing. It's never too late to embrace your vulnerabilities and to share your vulnerabilities. And I think it's really important that, to know, if you're in a relationship and it's been many years and you've never really gone that far, then it's never too late.
yes, exactly. Sharing is caring, right? And then the last part is, after you're embracing the vulnerability, which is vulnerability is in the dictionary, it is a noun. It is the quality or state of being exposed to the possibility of being attacked or harmed, either physically or emotionally. Who in the hell wants to do that? Who? So I understand, that me saying live with heart, open up, have courage, that is like, feels impossible for some people.
I would like to add to that, if you look at the greatest generation, the generation that fought in World War II, they were exposed to war, and vulnerabilities are bad vulnerabilities. So if your country is vulnerable for attack and all this other stuff, there's a really good chance that those men and women that served brought that back into a relationship and maybe
Yeah.
even raised the kids. So boomers
So
are
no one's sharing.
right. So boomers, a lot of boomers, I firmly believe, were brought up to not express vulnerabilities, and I think we're seeing a lot of that in the world right now with the way politics are and the way that certain things are playing out, and it's millennials against boomers and things like that.
Right.
I firmly believe that that just two generations away, you have a complete different look. And I'm not saying that millennials have it figured out. No, I mean, we're technically millennials, so I guess I guess,
We're on the
but
cusp.
oh, it's ridiculous. But like, I can honestly say for sure that it's not like millennials, maybe they're not any more vulnerable. I just think though that generations can be brought up a certain way because that's the way that they
Each
were
generation
exposed.
is quite different from the previous one, and in ways that you can research so much, and there's so many scientific explanations as to why that is. But yeah, if you're raised by a generation, or you're in a generation where vulnerability is not used with anyone, I don't think you've really been heard or seen, or what are your fears, and what are your hopes and dreams, and what are you made of?
Yeah, I mean, if you really look at it, whenever you're going through school, and whether you're going up from preschool all the way up, like, what are your fears is not a common question. It's always, what do you want to do when you grow up? It's always, it's always focus on these positive things and all of that. But if you really were asked, what do you fear throughout your childhood, think of how different that would be for anybody, even people that feel like they are appropriately vulnerable. That could make a huge difference in a child's life growing up.
Yeah, it's starting the conversation at a young age. So yeah, and then receiving all of that with an open heart, just being open to the person who's sharing with you. The last part of that is of the six things that really helped me is I put it down here as quick now, do nothing. So increasingly, from my perspective, we are living in a fix-it world. We have very little tolerance for uncertainty or discomfort, and we tend to move quickly toward a resolution, right? So we fix everything. We fix problems, feelings, health, noses, whole people. We fix breasts.
Butts.
Sometimes, though, uncertainty or discomfort is exactly where we need to be, because it's here that we find clarity and insight and a readiness to either move forward or to pull back. So don't be too quick to move out of an uncomfortable feeling. Sit with them. I'm reading Glennon Doyle's Untamed right now, and she reminded me that it is human to feel all the feelings. All of the feelings should be felt. There's annoyance and discomfort and anger and sometimes sadness, but they're not wrong. It's not a wrong feeling. Sit with them. They're like little children who need attention. See them and hear them and just empathize with them, right? Sometimes they're the richest source of growth and information about what's right. And so, granted, I'm not a professional, and I'm still learning, but these are all really great nuggets to hopefully help you all in seeing your own vulnerabilities and hopefully being able to share them with your partner. When I opened up, when I opened up and when I was more vulnerable with Nathaniel, I was never disappointed, and I can say never disappointed. He saw the energy I was putting into it, and he had already started following suit. It was kind of like a dance. It wasn't oversharing from him. It was him being bold and bearing his soul, and who could ask for more than from a person? But the greatest gift of all, like the best gift of all, and the one that surprised me more than anything, which I love surprises, is this. All of those times that I was vulnerable with another human being were not in vain. Sometimes I was rejected and shamed or left behind, and I was left feeling alone, confused, and rejected. But they were all done in service to my higher self, the one who deserves love and equal appreciation from another human being. It was just practice. And it just so happens that the one I was practicing being brave for was Nathaniel as much as for myself.
It's a beautiful thing to not only be doing this for yourself, where you're working through yourself, you're exposing your vulnerabilities in a healthy way, you're communicating them in a healthy way, but also it's being done on the other side too. So, I mean, I could pretty much share word for word exactly what she just said. I can say that for myself. I feel like we are, a lot of it comes down to you and I were, even though we weren't expecting a relationship, us getting into a relationship and us going through the motions of the way that we did was because we were ready. We were finally ready to experience all of those vulnerabilities that, like you said, being rejected and shamed, left alone, feeling alone, confused and rejected. All of that, is something that you have to face. And I know I went through that with my own self for a few years. I just basically had to take the brick wall down, and I just started having to look at everything, or I was never going to have a healthy relationship with another human being, not just for a partner, but friendships. I've lost plenty of friends because I wasn't vulnerable enough. And, also being able to be open and honest with your family. We often don't think of vulnerabilities with our family as being a big deal, but it really can be. It really can be.
It's huge.
Right. It can be a way to expose all of the things that made it difficult for you growing up, and being able to share that. And especially when you have a receptive parent, that's willing to actually say, you know what, you're right. Is the way I was raised, and, repeating the habits and things like that. But back to what I was originally saying is just that you and I were at a point where, even though we weren't looking for a relationship, we were ready for one because we were willing to put that out there.
Right. So if you're in a relationship right now, and if you feel like I'm doing all this work and this person isn't, say something. Just say, hey, I'm feeling like this. I see it like this. What do you think? And you might be surprised by what comes out. That person might not know how. And I'm going to, of course, I have to quote Brene Brown before we go in part 2, but I will explain 7 ways to be emotionally vulnerable in a relationship. And so from Brene Brown, she said in one of her shows, "You show me a woman who can sit with a man in real shame and fear and vulnerability and just be with him. I'll show you a woman who's done her work and doesn't derive her status or power from that guy. You show me a guy who can sit with a woman in real shame and fear and vulnerability and not fix anything but just listen. I'll show you a guy who's done his work and doesn't derive his power and status from being Oz, the fixer of all things." How she's so dope. I love her so much.
Yeah, you've got me liking her.
I mean, if you guys are interested, just her first TED Talk was what went viral. So if you look up TED Talk, Brene Brown, vulnerability, that is gonna like blow you away. And then there's countless books, and there's countless other talks, and there's countless shows, and she's got a special on Netflix. So get to know her if you're interested, if you're interested in what she has to say, and just expanding way more on what I'm saying. But now I'm going to begin part 2 and just quickly review 7 ways that you can be emotionally vulnerable in a relationship. Because if you have, like I did, build up a tough shell around your heart, and you worry about allowing it to crack open just a little bit to let your partner in, it is bound to have a negative effect on your relationship. But if your partner doesn't struggle to be emotionally available, they can find it hard to understand why they can't get through to you. If they don't struggle, they don't understand, why can't you open up? So I know, like, you can put, Nathaniel's going to put his input throughout, but think about each one of these, okay? And really just hear it. But number 1 is letting them know you struggle with vulnerability, right? So first things first, an important step towards showing more vulnerability in your relationship is letting your partner know that you struggle with it. And they'll probably already worked it out for themselves, but it might set their mind at ease to know that it's not them, it's you. You're struggling with being vulnerable. Let them know that you are aware of the importance of emotional vulnerability and that you'll do your best, but that you won't always succeed. And you don't have to go into much detail if you don't feel comfortable. It's just good to give them an idea of where you think your issues may have sprung from. Number 2, when they ask you how you are, tell the truth. Honesty is a big part of vulnerability, believe it or not. And we're pretty used to hiding our feelings away in that way. The standard answer to the question, how are you, is fine. And that's all well and good. When your colleague asks you, it's no doubt they would be taken aback if you actually told them how you really were. But when your partner asks you, try to be a little more honest. If you're great, tell them why you're great. If you're feeling low and you can't quite put your finger on why, just share that with them. And by being honest about something as seemingly insignificant as how you are doing, you can pave the way for greater honesty in your relationship as a whole, right? So think about it. If you can tell them you've had a bad day and realize you're not being judged, your confidence in them will start to grow. It's baby steps, y'all. Doesn't happen overnight. Number 3, as we were talking about honesty, be honest with yourself. There's no way you'll ever be able to share the inner workings of your mind with a partner if you can't be honest with yourself. It's impossible, because we're generally pretty successful at convincing ourselves that the front we put on for other people is actual reality, even though it isn't. I have found that journaling is an amazing way to figure out how you're really feeling. You can trust a piece of paper and a pen, but that's starting to trust yourself, letting your feelings out onto a page and just this stream of consciousness, and not worrying about words or grammar or trying to correct or be politically correct. And then just try to catch yourself when you're not being totally honest. Read it. Is that totally honest, or is that your facade?
Something else too with the journaling is that you could actually, I don't always journal for myself, but I find myself writing to you, and just kind of like, if you have a partner that you're at that point where you can share a lot of things, sometimes journaling, it's a form of journaling for me, but it's just a way that I can get my feelings out there. And I can tell you, what's going on in my brain and this sort of thing that maybe the words couldn't come out if we're face to face and we're talking.
Yeah. The art of writing is very special. And if you haven't ever journaled before, or if you have and you've put it down, or if you do every day, you will start to know that articulating how you feel to yourself, it'll give you a better chance at opening up with another person. It starts with you, it starts with yourself and being honest with yourself.
Yeah. And just real quick on that too, it's just one of those things where, if you're not comfortable with just writing, I am feeling this way today, you could, in your journal, write to someone else, and it's still for you. You may never share it with that person.
I've done that,
but it's a way that you can put your feelings out there because maybe you're uncomfortable with just writing to yourself.
Yeah. I've done that before. My shaman actually just had me do that homework a couple of weeks ago, and it really helped. One of my biggest vulnerabilities, and I used to see it as a weakness, is my body image. My body image has, oh man, I don't even know how to explain how much it has affected my life. But it's a very negative image. It's a very negative self-image of the body that I have and what it should be and what I hate about it. And like a lot of women, we derive our power and our femininity and our appeal by our sexual appeal and by our physical look. And I am really, really, really starting to dive into it and open up, and I'm talking about it. And I'm talking to whoever is listening about it. But it's going to be another show. It's going to be about body image and our self-confidence in a relationship. But it's a huge vulnerability that I was given homework about, from my shaman, and writing to myself as a young woman, as a young girl, and writing to my mother as a young girl, and writing to my father, who was deceased when I was 7 years old. He passed away. So it was writing to all of them, and and it really tore me apart. I cried a lot, and I couldn't believe the things that were coming out on the page. Being honest with myself about that part of that huge vulnerability that I have, my vulnerable body image, it gave me permission to share with Nathaniel, and he is doing his best to understand it because he doesn't see me at all in the way that I see myself.
Not at all.
He's consistently telling me I'm beautiful and I'm sexy, and I'm a huge turn on for him. And I look at myself and I'm just like, God, you must be insane. What's wrong with this guy? So it's a big vulnerability that I am just now opening up about. And again, I'm not going to go too much into it, but if you have a vulnerability that is similar, write yourself a letter about it. You don't necessarily have to share it with your partner right away, but it will give you an idea of what it really is, because you're looking at the things in the shadow of yourself. You have shadows in your soul, in your spirit, and giving them attention and putting light onto them, giving them attention and sitting there empathetically with your shadow is all that it wants. It just wants to be heard and seen. So if journaling is a way for you to get all of that out, then I strongly suggest buying a journal. It doesn't have to look pretty, and getting yourself a pencil and just going crazy.
Yeah, I think with a lot, I'm not an expert, and I don't have, sometimes I'm not too confident about my looks and everything, but I don't have, really too many issues in a way of body dysmorphia and things like that. But one thing that I can say from the outside is that it is just one big cycle. It's like if you take a train, and you just make the track go completely round and round and round and round and round. It's not going to ever go anywhere.
It's a hamster wheel.
It is
of destruction.
And so finally,
it's very frustrating.
You've got to break open that circle, start adding the track on, and find your destinations. And I think what you were listing, what you were saying, and writing these letters to yourself and your mom, I think those are the next train stop. So you're
that's
getting
a
out
really
of that
beautiful
circle,
way of putting it.
and you're moving forward.
Actually going to a destination that's going to help you,
right?
Or that's going to break open something else. There's a lot to discover inside yourself. Trust me, you are not simple. You are not a simple human being.
No.
You might think that you're a pretty simple human being, but you're not. You have a lot in there. And that includes, number 4, is sharing your passions and dreams. So emotional vulnerability isn't all about sharing your worries and your fears. It's about the good stuff too. So, it's not all like, this is going to be so hard. This is so hard. I don't want you to see me. I'm weak. You're going to get rid of me and throw me out with the garbage. No, it's about the good stuff too. A great way to begin to open up is by sharing the dreams that you have that you might be reluctant to talk about. Perhaps you worry that your significant other or that other people will laugh at them or think that they're ridiculous or totally unrealistic. Nothing is unattainable, nothing at all. So if you have a hobby, a passion, or a goal that you find incredibly exciting, but you've never told anyone about it, let your partner in on that secret. That is such an awesome conversation. That day might be something that you will never forget. They'll feel like they've gained a real insight into your world, and you'll realize that sharing things with them really isn't scary after all. Passions, your goals, those dreams, those huge things that really make you excited, share that with him or her or them if you have many people in your relationship. Have a sharing circle. Do that in a way where it's exciting and make it a ritual, be like, this is going to be our sharing day. I can't wait to tell you about what I really want to do with my life, and get the feedback or get the respect, and the reciprocity that you deserve. So definitely share your passions. And then also that brings you to number 5 is sit down, talk, and setting boundaries. So if you've decided right now, you have a decision that there's something in particular that you want to share with your partner, make sure you sit and chat with them at a moment when there are no distractions and no time pressures. So like I said, it's going to be like a ritual. And before you sit down, establish in your head exactly what it is you like to talk to them about, and try to focus on one issue per chat rather than bombarding them with several issues or insecurities all at once. That's so important, y'all. You have to,
true.
Yeah, there's got to be one thing, because every single one of them is important. They all deserve their own time and respect. every single one of them. So when you speak, let them know if there are any boundaries you'd like them to respect, such as not trying to give you any advice on your problem, or don't criticize me, or don't share this with anyone, even if it is unintentional. I just need you to sit here and listen to me and be with me.
This right here is very important because I used to be the kind of person that if you're telling me things and you're spilling your heart to me, I wanted to help. I wanted to be able to be like, oh, well,
Right.
try these things, do these things. This worked
That's
for
what
me.
Brene Brown said. Men, don't be the fixer. You are not Oz.
Right. And that's exactly what I would
Yeah.
do. And I in a lot of cases, I did more damage than good, because then all of a sudden they didn't want to open up to me. They didn't want to share those sort of things. And that was a big learning moment for me, was to just sit back and listen. You don't have to share your own experiences. You do not have to share what worked for you. You can just
That's huge.
listen, because that person, if maybe that's all they need to do is just talk.
And
They're freeing
understand
their
that
soul to you.
understand that it takes a lot to get to that point where you're ready to share with that person that, or, your partner's coming to share with you. And it took a lot for them to get to that point. So don't overshadow it with you. It's not about you. It's about them. So when your significant other has everything off of their chest, make sure you let them know that you're so grateful for their attention and your support and the respect. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you for not overshadowing. Thank you for just sitting with me and listening to my passions, my goals, my insecurities, my weaknesses, my vulnerabilities. Make sure you give them that feedback and that you really appreciate it. And this is huge. Number 6, don't be afraid to cry. If tears well up, don't hold them back. Crying is incredibly cleansing. And if there are tears in your eyes, they're always better out than in. Don't think of tears as a sign of weakness, but as a signal that you're not afraid to recognize and own your emotions and share them with your partner. Believe me, somebody who's not afraid to cry and allows him or herself to truly feel is far more attractive to others than someone that refuses to open up. Crying is a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I ever had on just a simple sharing something with a partner. I shouldn't say simple, but just sitting down and talking with your partner. I don't think I had ever cried about really anything to anybody else, until I had really worked on my vulnerabilities and all of these things I've been putting so much effort into for the past 3 years. It just wasn't, it's not that I was brought up not to cry. I didn't have, my dad wasn't sitting there telling me, oh, don't be a baby, crying's for baby. Like, I didn't have any of that, but I also it wasn't also important for me to be able to cry either.
Right. And that's sitting with all of those emotions I was talking about earlier when I was reading Glennon Doyle, is that every single emotion is validated. You have to sit with those feelings, sit with your sadness, sit with it's a release. Crying is a release, right? So think of all the releases that you have in a day to day. Orgasm is a release. Laughing is a release of an emotion. Crying is a release of an emotion. Screaming and being angry is a release of an emotion. As long as you're not abusing someone, release those things. Why the hell would you keep that inside of you? It shouldn't be sitting inside of you. That's when rot starts to set in. That's when you really start to stink on the inside. It's like a dead animal underneath your porch, right? Like, it's going to start smelling really bad. You can paint your porch. You can set up incense. You can, wear a mask so you don't smell it. But lo and behold, a dead animal is going to stink, just like those pent up emotions.
For sure.
And lastly, but not leastly,
I like that.
Number 7, take it slowly but surely. If you're listening to this, you've already made a fantastic start. Congratulations. You are recognizing that maybe you struggle with emotional vulnerability, or you're seeing these patterns in your significant other. Recognizing it is the first step toward making changes and starting to build the strong, honest, and open relationship you really want. Because I believe if you're human and you have a heartbeat right now, you do want open, honest relationships that have a strong foundation. You want that for yourself. No one is alone here. You're not an island. I don't care what you say, that no one will understand you. And, your situation is so much different than others. You're not special in your vulnerabilities. There's so many people that share the same thing. Take it slowly. Don't push yourself too far or too fast. And keep taking baby steps forward. And before you know it, you'll be just where you want to be.
Yes.
Yes. And reach out if, I'm always evolving. I'm always learning. But if I can help in any way, and if you want to talk about what you're facing and what you're dealing with, you have ways to connect with me and Nathaniel. If you feel like you want to talk to a therapist, go talk to a therapist. If you feel like you need a shaman, go find a shaman. If you feel like you need to go to church and, so you can loosen your vulnerability bone a little bit.
Maybe, you've got to go to a meeting.
Maybe you have to go to a meeting. Yep.
I think what a lot of this comes down to, ultimately is the fact that sometimes certain things that we do are negative for us, but they bring us so much immediate satisfaction. I think for a lot of people, for people that just kind of want to dull themselves, they drink. If they want, if they feel really down about themselves and they're in a relationship, but they cheat.
Well, they think it's easy. Yeah. Again, like you said, it's a disconnect though.
Right.
It's a huge disconnect.
A lot of the times when you're doing something wrong that's actually harming you or your partner, a lot of that is because you have vulnerabilities and you haven't faced them. And that's ultimately what this episode has been all about, is just making sure you understand it is healthy and normal to share your vulnerabilities, set your boundaries, and just be ready. Just and then you may see that your partner is going to want to do the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's changed my life completely. It started with yoga, and it went to meditation and opening up with my girlfriends and opening up a little with my family. And then there was a lot of therapy for over the years, but I dove into books. And Brene Brown she is an expert. She is the expert on vulnerability. No doubt in my mind that if you were to come across her readings or her books or her shows, like I said, you will have an understanding and you will see that, it's really good. It's really safe. It's really healthy to share. And it's healthy to have vulnerabilities. It's healthy to have insecurities. It's just as healthy to have passions and goals. So if you want, I will share any resources with anyone. If you would like more, I might even post them after we can post them after we release this one. All of the resources that are in my possession, I want to share with anyone. So take what we've said, not with a grain of salt, but with a really open mind, please. And just start. That's all you have to do is push the button and start. And go slow and have faith in yourself and trust in yourself. And yeah. And listen, and if you're finding yourself in a relationship that you can't be vulnerable in because the other person is abusive or is manipulative or is taking advantage of you or is an asshole, that's not for you.
And an even tougher way to look at it is if you feel like this person is their vulnerabilities aren't exactly real and you feel like they're just telling you what you want to hear, it's a lot
with your intuition,
lot more difficult
right?
to figure that one out, but still go with your intuition.
Go with your intuition.
And do what's best for you.
You know more than you think you know. That's what I tell my students, my yoga students, that you're stronger than you think you are. You're more beautiful than you'll ever know. So you know more than you give yourself credit for. So it's hard to share, but do it. Just do it. The world will be a better place. Your world will be a better place. And give yourself permission and give your partner permission and see what happens. Be the child. I wonder what would happen if, yeah, right? So thank you again so much for listening, for spending time with us, and for opening your ears and your mind and your heart. It means the world to us both, and all the dogs have rearranged themselves around the house. So if you heard things happening, that was them, and they are sending love too. So we will talk soon, and please stay tuned for more to come. Sending love and light to you all.
Thanks for listening.
Goodbye.